Where is the line when it comes to overtraining? All over the place, we're always hearing how overtraining is one of the quickest ways to actually sabotage your progress. Well, I want to dive into what exactly overtraining is and how it can affect your overall hormone balance and your endocrine system in the first place. You see, believe it or not, overtraining can actually affect how much of your hormones you produce. And at the end of the day, if you end up way too overtrained, you can actually reset your hormone levels down to a bare minimum state where all of your hormones are completely out of whack. But let's focus a little bit on cortisol to begin. So when you look at working out, it's a stressor, right? You're putting stress on your body physically. Well, it's no different in a lot of ways than emotional stress, the kind of stress that you may have when you're, say, stressed out at work, or you're financially struggling, or you're having family issues. All those things trigger the same kind of stress response when it comes from a hormone standpoint. So when you're looking at physical training combined with emotional stress, you can have a whirlwind of hormonal issues. So let's look at how cortisol is actually affected when you train. One study by the Journal of Strength and Conditioning a couple of years ago found that those that worked out for longer than 59 minutes of high-intensity exercise actually had elevated saliva levels of cortisol compared to those that worked out for 30 minutes. What that ultimately tells us is that over 60 minutes of exercise, you start to elicit more of a cortisol response. Now again, that's not always bad. We need cortisol, and cortisol is always going to respond when we have any kind of stress in our system. But what the problem is when we start having chronically high levels of stress or chronically high levels of cortisol, that's when we start having issues. So if you're chronically overtrained and your body is eliciting that hormone response, eliciting that cortisol response every single day of the week or every single time you go into the gym, that's when you start developing a problem. And the next step after that is your adrenals can become fatigued. So once your adrenal system gets taxed, then that can send you into a whole different spiral of hormonal effects. Another study that was interesting was one that was done a couple of years ago that took two separate groups of people that conducted the exact same workout. Now, group A was emotionally stressed. Group B was not. So when you take a look at these two groups and what their actual hormone response was, what their cortisol response was after undergoing the same workout for said period of time, those that were emotionally stressed had almost twice the overall cortisol levels of those that weren't emotionally stressed. So ultimately what I'm saying here is if you're emotionally stressed and you're overtrained, you can compound and sometimes increase the negative effects of cortisol by 2x. So what ultimately can this do if your cortisol levels are elevated for a long period of time? The first thing it's going to do is going to put you in a catabolic state. What that means is your body is going to start breaking down muscle tissue as a mechanism of survival. You're under stress, so your body starts breaking down whatever it can to try to store fat because it is more calorically dense. So it starts breaking down protein, it starts breaking down sugars. It does whatever it can simply to survive. It's simply survival. But when levels of cortisol are chronically elevated, that is when your testosterone levels will drop, that's when your estrogen levels will drop, and that's when your progesterone levels will drop. What that means is it ends up cascading into a further effect of elevated cortisol. Because the lower that those levels are, the lower your testosterone levels are, the lower your estrogen and the lower your progesterone, the harder it is for your body to actually balance cortisol. So eventually you go down this road where it just compounds each other and you end up getting a worse and worse overall condition until eventually you ultimately exhaust your adrenals. And when you exhaust your adrenals, all your hormone levels, including your cortisol levels, plummet down to the bottom. And when your cortisol levels are low, that means that you have low blood pressure, which can mean lower nutrient delivery, it can mean lower nutrient uptake, but worst, it just means that all your hormones are coming to a screeching halt. And that's going to leave you feeling fatigued, it's going to leave you feeling quite honestly horrible, and worst of all, you're not going to be able to get the body that you want. So if you feel yourself going into an overtraining state, you're going to have a lot more success if you just back off the workouts a little bit and increase your adherence to a diet. Because honestly, you're better off to slack a little bit on the workout, but be more attentive to your diet to get yourself recovered, get your cortisol levels back in check, than you would be to keep on slamming it in the gym and ruin all the hard work that you're already putting forth the effort in the kitchen. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's hard to look your best if you're freaking dead. So do what you can to recover, eat right, and stay out of the gym if you're feeling like you're overtaxed. As always, keep it locked in here in my videos, and I'll see you in the next one.